We continue now at the top of Daf Ayin Beis Amud Aleph and Meseches Bava Kamma. This is Bava Kamma Daf 72a. On the previous Amud, Rava asked Rav Nachman, what if a ganav steals a shore from partners and then he shechts the shore and then he admits to one of the partners, so he doesn't have to pay that partner the 5 times the amount, but he does have to pay the other partner, so he's essentially going to pay 5 chatzoi bakar, 5 half bakar. So is there such a concept of paying 5 chatzoi bakar? Originally Rav Nachman answered that there is no such concept, that he would not have to pay at all, but then Rav Nachman retracted. In the morning he retracted and said there is a concept of chamisha chatzoi bakar, and Rav Nachman now continues, the only reason I didn't give you that answer last night was the lo achli bisr deturis, because I didn't eat the meat of the ox. Rashi says that's like a metaphor. The lo achli bisr detur lo dikdakti time shel davrim, means I wasn't careful in giving the answer before, but now that I've thought about it, this is the proper answer. There is a concept of chatzoi bakar. And the Gemara continues, Vela maishna reisha umaishna seifa. But if that's the case, what's the difference between the reisha and the seifa? And Rashi explains, umaishna seifa, meaning to say, kevan de reisha, if you are now saying that the reisha of the Mishnah, again, the reisha of the Mishnah was talking about a situation where a person steals from his father and he shechs the animal, and the difference between the reisha and the seifa is at what point in time did his father die. If his father died before the shechita of the animal, so in that situation, that's the case of the seifa, there we say that he does not have to pay the dalid v'hei. And in the first case, in the reisha of the Mishnah, the case is that he shechted it before the father dies, and he does have to pay the dalid v'hei. And so the question of the Gemara, as Rashi explains, is kevan de reisha afilu lo amad bedin. If in the reisha we're now saying that it's even though he didn't go to court, there wasn't actually a court case in terms of paying the dalid v'hei. Kamma rachmana de chamisha bakar, still he didn't go to court, but still we're saying that in the case where he shechted it and then the father dies, he does have to pay the chamisha bakar. Va'afilu chamisha chatzoi bakar. The point is now we're saying there is a concept of chamisha chatzoi bakar. So if his father dies, so then essentially he is admitting it to himself. When his father dies, he's one of the people that's supposed to collect the chamisha bakar, and so then it becomes chamisha chatzoi bakar. But we're saying that you still pay it, because now we're saying it doesn't have to be that there was a court case. Even if he admitted it, so to speak, and got out of the payment to himself, there still is a concept of paying the rest of the heirs of his father. There is a concept of chamisha chatzoi bakar. So if that's the case, so seifa, so in the end of the Mishnah, meaning in the later case of the Mishnah that's coming up, let's say his father dies first, and then he shechs it and sells it, so lama lo yeshalim lo echa beschalkam, why doesn't he pay his brothers their portion? He should pay the heirs, the other heirs of the father, should get their portion of the 4 or 5 times the amount. Why is the reisha any different than the seifa? If we're saying afilu chamisha chatzoi bakar in the reisha, so then we should say afilu chamisha chatzoi bakar in the seifa as well, when his father dies first. And to that the Gemara answers, Amar Lei said back to him, Reisha karina be v'tavcho kulo b'isura. In the Reisha, when he slaughters it, so we say that he's slaughtering the entire animal b'isur, because at the point in time that he's slaughtering the animal, it does not belong to him at all. He slaughters it first while the father's alive. So if he slaughters it entirely b'isur, so then he has to pay the dalid v'hei. Seifa, but at the end, in the later case of the Mishnah, where he's slaughtering it after the father dies, so he has a certain ownership, a partial ownership over the animal. So lo karina be v'tavcho kulo b'isura. We don't call it that he slaughtered it all b'isur, and that's why there's no dalid v'hei. That's the explanation of the difference between the reisha and the seifa. And the Gemara continues at the 2 dots. The Mishnah said, "Hashochet v'nimtzas treifa v'chul." If somebody shechts the animal, it turns out that the animal is a treifa. Also, if someone shechts an animal that is chulin ba'azara, in both of those situations, it's a shchita she'ena ru'uya. You won't be able to eat from that animal, but nevertheless, the Tana Kamma says there is a payment of dalid v'hei. Rabbi Shimon disagrees. Rabbi Shimon holds that if it's a shchita she'ena ru'uya, that's not called a shchita, and there is no dalid v'hei. And the Gemara says, "Amar le Rav Chavivi me Chozna le Rav Ashi." Rav Chavivi from Chozna said to Rav Ashi, "Shma mina." You see from this. You see from the Mishnah, Eino l'shchita el levasof, that the shchita really doesn't happen until the end of the process of the shchita. The yeshna l'shchita mitchila v'yasof, because if it's considered to be shchita from the beginning till the end, kevan de shachat bapor. So once you shech that animal a little, talking about a case where you shecht chulin in the azara by the Beis Hamikdash, so also at that moment in time, that animal is going to be prohibited, and therefore idach, therefore the rest of the shchita, lo demari katavach, he's not shechting an animal that belongs to its owner anymore. It no longer belongs to the owner once it is asur behana, and so therefore there would not be a chiyuv of dalid v'hei if that were the case. In other words, the Gemara is saying that if shchita was mitchila v'yatzof, there should not be dalid v'hei, because at the very beginning of the process it's no longer the owner's, and then at the completion of the process, when you're chayav the dalid v'hei, it's not the owner's, you're not going to pay dalid v'hei. And Rashi says, Shema minami dektani masnisan hashochid chulin ba'azar chayv. From the fact that the Mishnah says that one who shechts chulin in the azar is chayv dalid v'hei, that shows eina l'shchita el levasof, that the shchita really only occurs at the end of the shchita. Hilkach kol Kamma de tavach de mari katavach. Therefore, through the entire shchita, it belongs to its owner. That's why you're chayv dalid v'hei. Uv'gemar shchita hu demitzar b'hana. It only becomes asr b'hana. You only can no longer derive benefit from this animal at the end of the shchita process. And the Gemara continues, Amar le Rav Huna b'rei de Rava, Rav Huna the son of Rava said to him, Ki kam chayiv ahahu porsa. What makes a person chayiv the dalid v'hei? It's actually the very beginning, that little amount of shchita at the very beginning that's mechayiv the dalid v'hei, and therefore you don't have to necessarily say that the Mishnah is saying Eina l'shchita el levasof. It could be that the very beginning of the shchita, the animal becomes prohibited, becomes asr b'hana, but it's also at the very beginning of the shchita that there's a chayiv of dalid v'hei. But the Gemara continues, Amar le Rav Ashi, Rav Ashi said back to him, Lo sidchi, don't push off the question in this manner, because it says they have to slaughter the animal. It means a full slaughtering, and you don't have that if you only slaughter it partially, and so therefore again there's not going to be a chiyuv of dalid v'hei until the end of the shchita, and therefore we are back to our question. Don't we see from the Mishnah that eina l'shchita el levasof, that in terms of the shchita that makes it prohibited from hana when you shech the chulin ba'azara, that also only takes place at the end of the shchita, and so that's why the Gemara says el akasha. So then we're back to our question: does it seem like the Mishnah is saying eina l'shchita el levasof? And the Gemara says, Amar le, he said to him, Hachi Amar Rav Gamda mishmei de Rava. This is what Rav Gamda says in the name of Rava. Kagon sheshachat miksa simonin bachutz ukamarin bifnim. The case could be that he shechted part of the animal actually outside of the azar, so it didn't become asr b'hana immediately. He then finished the shchita inside the azar. It's only at that moment that it becomes asr b'hana, but it's also at that moment that there's a chiyuv of dalid v'hei, and that's why there is a chiyuv of dalid v'hei. And the Gemara continues, Ika demasni lo aha. There are some people who learn what we just learned, but they learn it in the following manner. Am Rabbi Shimon mishum de Rabbi Levi Saba. Rabbi Shimon said in the name of Rabbi Levi Saba, Eino l'shchita el levasof, that shchita only occurs, it's only chal at the very end of the shchita process. And Rashi explains, Eino l'shchita, ein shchita nikris el levasof. Again, the idea is that it's not called a shchita except at the end of the shchita process. A nafkamina could be, let's say a person thinks when he has a carbon that he's going to do it outside of the proper place, so chutz lizmanan, or he's going to do it outside of the proper time, or mechashev shelo lishman, or he thinks that he's going to do it not without the proper intention. Eino machshava, that is not considered a machshava that disqualifies the carbon, elim kein chishe b'sof shchita, unless he has these thoughts at the end of the shchita process. That's the general nafkamina of saying eino l'shchita el levasof. So again, Rabbi Shimon says in the name of Rabbi Levi Saba that eino l'shchita el levasof. But Rabbi Yochanan says yeshna l'shchita mitchila v'yatsof, that it is considered shchita from the beginning till the end, and that's why Rashi says mitchila v'yatsof v'chal kama dechashiv have a machshava. Therefore, anywhere in the shchita process that he has these machshavas, it's going to be a problem. And then in response to that, Amar le Rav Chavivi me Chosna Rav Ashi, Rav Chavivi from Chosna says Rav Ashi leima kasav Rav Yochanan. Should we say that Rav Yochanan holds chulin shenishchutu ba'azara lav d'oraisa? It would seem that Rav Yochanan holds that if chulin is shechted in the azara, it's not a d'oraisa. As Rashi explains, chulin shenishchutu ba'azara plugs even Meseches Kiddushin. This is a machlokas in Meseches Kiddushin, whether when you shecht chulin ba'azara, does that become prohibited from benefit on a d'oraisa level or a d'rabanan level, either d'rabanan, whether it's d'oraisa or d'rabanan, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Ayin Beis Amid Beis.